want to ask about the situation with the government in Israel and Palestine and the government's stance. What do you think, first of all, of what Benjamin Netanyahu is looking to do in terms of moving in on Gaza and occupying it?
Well, I think it's a very risky proposition for a number of reasons. I think it's incredibly complex from a military perspective. If you look at Gaza from a bird's eye view on Google Earth, you'll see that a lot of it has been reduced to rubble. That makes it a lot easier to defend. It would be incredibly difficult for IDF troops to move through and clear. All the advantage would be with Hamas defenders and anyone else who would stand and fight. So we can expect more casualties from a military perspective, but also, the humanitarian crisis that could continue is also high risk. So, look, I understand the government's statement that they put out with a number of other countries. It was good to see the hostages and their well-being elevated in the statement. People have forgotten about the hostages, and Israel has every right to defend its borders, but also to pursue the recovery of its citizens. But I think the final paragraph was deeply unrealistic about a two-state solution, particularly excluding Hamas, for a number of reasons.
Well, just on that, I mean, Anthony Albanese's left the door open to recognising Palestine. What do you think of that move?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that the Prime Minister probably isn't across. Number one, Hamas still enjoys widespread grassroots support amongst the Palestinian people. If you look at the Palestinian Centre for Policy and Survey Research, which is based in Ramallah, it's part of the Ministry of Justice there. They've been doing polling of the Palestinian people almost quarterly since the year 2000. Their last poll number 93, which was conducted in September 24, showed that there is still a high level of support for the October 7th attacks amongst the Palestinian people, and there's still a high level of support for Hamas amongst the Palestinian people. In fact, Hamas is the most popular Palestinian faction. So there's grassroots support, and then number two, who's the alternative? We saw last year in Beijing, Hamas and Fatah meet, facilitated by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and signed the Beijing Declaration, which committed to a government of national unity. So, in fact, the war in Gaza has brought Fatah and Hamas together. And then finally, I'm not sure that a lot of the Palestinian factions, in fact, I mean, it'd be a good question to ask, how many actually recognise the legitimacy of the State of Israel? We have protesters on our shores crying out from the river to the sea, which is language taken from Hamas's 2017 document. So in order for a two-state solution to work, you've got to exclude Hamas. That will be very difficult. Number two, you've got to have an alternative. Well, Fatah and Hamas have committed to a government of national unity. And then number three, you've got to have both parties recognise each other, and I'm not sure there is widespread recognition for the State of Israel.
Sure. Well, what do you think about the statement suggesting that international law would be breached by Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you agree with that if he moves in?
Look, I think that's possible. I'm not an international lawyer. Certainly, I look at the weight of history, and Gaza has never successfully been occupied and pacified by Israel. So I'm not sure why we'd expect it to be any different now under Benjamin Netanyahu. So I think we've just got to temper this with realism. I think as well that we want to come to some sort of settlement. We won't have a lasting peace. That's true. There's always outbreaks in the Middle East, particularly around Israel. But we do need to move towards a peace settlement, and this is going to involve compromise, and it's going to be uncomfortable because on the side of Gaza, there are some very unsavoury characters involved. And that's why it's trite to just come up with easy solutions on a statement. This is going to be a lot of hard work. And if there was an easy solution, we'd already be there.
So do you oppose recognising Palestine briefly at the moment?
At the moment, I am very hesitant to recognise the State of Palestine with Hamas in prime position. You've got to remember the last time they held elections in Palestine or the Palestinian territories was in 2006. Hamas won a majority in the Legislative Council, 74 seats of the 132. Why would it be any different now if they did move to elections? Let's just say the Gaza conflict wound up and they moved to elections. What guarantee would there be that Hamas would not win another majority? So I'm just being realistic about our prospects of peace. If potentially Hamas is still governing Gaza at the end of all of this.
And what do you make of Donald Trump meeting Vladimir Putin in Alaska with Vladimir Zelensky already indicating a deal might not be possible?
Look, again, that's another area of the world where Australians hope for peace, and we really hope that President Trump can land something. And of course, President Zelensky's been leading his country for a lot of years through this, since February 22. There's a lot of Ukrainians who've suffered as a result of the war, and I understand that he would be very hesitant to settle for anything less than his people would expect or accept. So again, another peace process which is fragile, difficult, and which will involve a lot of work and compromise.
Since the election, you've come out very stridently against net zero. You told your constituents in an email recently titled "Gaslit by Labor, the Truth About Net Zero." Have you ever been bullied into disbelieving something you knew to be true? You then said Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen were gaslighting Australians on climate policy, and you said the system's a scam. The net zero economy favours big foreign commercial interests. Are you a climate skeptic? And clearly you'll be pushing hard for the coalition to dump net zero, I take it.
Well, what's a climate skeptic? First of all, Andrew, seeing we're just getting on the same page. It's,
okay, do you think
6:45 here?
Do you think climate change is real? Do you think it's occurring?
Yeah, the climate's been changing throughout. Of course, the climate change has been occurring throughout history. The question is, how much does Australia have a role in changing the climate when we produce 1.1% of the world's emissions? We export 25% of the world's coal. We export 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas to the biggest emitters like China, India, Japan, and other countries. In the Asia-Pacific region alone, the uptake of fossil fuels is increasing, as it did last year. So the question is, what should we do about it? Should we transfer our heavy industry, Australian jobs, offshore? Should we demand that the Australian people pay more for their power bills? Should we actually orchestrate a massive transfer of wealth through our tax system so that Australians are paying more for their power? And I think that's fundamentally unjust and it's hypocritical, and that's why I've called out Labor on this.
And I guess you're hoping then the coalition comes to an anti-net zero policy.
Well, I assume I'm in the majority, but given that we just suffered a massive loss at the election, given that we're going through a process of revisiting policy, I've spoken my mind, but I'm probably in the minority, and that's okay. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't fight for a better deal for the Australian people.
A lot of talk about you, Andrew Hastie. Are you interested in leading the Liberal Party at any point?
I've said I'm interested in leading the Liberal Party, but around May, I made it very clear that my young family, my wife, comes first, and also my constituency. So I'm just doing what I can to serve my constituents here in Canning. I'm obviously enjoying this role of Home Affairs, and I'll keep doing that. That's my job. But I'm not going to lie to you and say I don't have any ambition to lead. Of course I do. But timing in politics is everything. And right now, Susan Lee is our leader, and we're doing everything we can to build a platform to win the next election.
Do you think you have what it takes to lead the Liberal Party from the West Coast with the experience that you have behind you?
Yes, I do. And Andrew, all this practice getting up talking to you early in the morning, it's possible.
Andrew Hastie, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.